welcome to Daily Debrief brought to you by People's Dispatch. I'm Shreya and today we'll be discussing the latest from the James Webb Telescope, reports of alleged war crimes by British forces in Afghanistan and the extension of aid to rebel-controlled areas in Syria. Our first story is from distant space and distant time. The first images from the James Webb Space Telescope have taken the world by storm, with scientists getting insights into processes that took place billions of years ago. One of the most exciting images was of light from in the earliest days of the universe, about 13 billion years ago. Bapa Sinha is here to explain more about this. So thank you for being with us on the show. We've been seeing these images coming in for 2 days now. Could you tell us more about the details of these images?
Right. So to start off with, there have been 5 sets of images which have been released. The first one is an image from the SMAX 0723 galaxy cluster, and that's what's making most of the news. There are dots in that image in the background of that image, and they believe that at least one of those dots is from 13 billion light years away. Right. So light coming from that object started around the beginning of the universe. The universe is about 13.8 billion light years, and this object is about 13 billion light years away. So that's one of the images. There is another image which is about a planet about 1150 light years away. What is interesting about the planet is it's a giant planet. It's a gaseous planet, but there is trace of water in the planet, and water is kind of essential for life. So that's what's exciting about that image. There is another image which is from the Stephens Quintet. That's a set of galaxies. There are 5 galaxies, and these galaxies are they're calling it a cosmic dance of galaxies. The galaxies are colliding into each other. So the pictures are from galaxies colliding, and then the different processes which happen when galaxies collide. The last 2 images are 2 nebulas. One is called the Southern Ring Nebula, which is about 290 million light years away, and that's a star system which is dying. And so when a star dies, is dying, it gives out these bursts of these clouds of gas and dust, and so we see 2 stars, both of which are dying, but the one which is more closer to death, that giving out these rings of gas and dust. The last one is from the Carina Nebula, which has been called the Cosmic Cliffs, and that's a nebula, basically this huge clouds of gas and dust, which are the kind of the birthplaces of new stars. And so the excitement is that we're going to see how these new stars come into being. And so those are, in short, the 5 sets of images which have been circulated.
And like you said, this image of light from 13 billion years ago, it's creating the most excitement.
Yeah.
So can you tell us how was the telescope able to capture it?
So this telescope is special for 2 reasons. One is that it has a giant antenna, right? So it's much bigger than the Hubble telescope, which is the other large telescope we have sent to space. The other thing about this telescope is that it operates in the infrared spectrum, while the Hubble operates in the visible light spectrum. So the thing is that as light comes to us from very distant objects, they undergo what is called the redshift. So light originating from stars and galaxies very far away, by the time they reach us, they move to the infrared spectrum. So the farther they are away, the more in the infrared spectrum they would be. And so the Hubble is not able to capture them, while the James Webb is. Now, what is interesting about this particular image is that it is actually the foreground of the image, the big bright objects, they are galaxies from a galaxy cluster called SMAX 0732, which is about 4.6 billion light years away. The Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. So what we are seeing is effectively images from just like before the birth of the Earth itself, right? Because these things are so far away that the time it takes for light to travel from there to here is the time of the Earth itself. But what is more interesting is that this galaxy cluster is acting like what they call the gravitational lens. So it is kind of enlarging images which are behind it. And some of those stars which are way beyond it, like 13 billion light years away, we are now able to see. So light which is coming from those objects are close to as old as the universe itself. And that is very interesting and exciting. And kind of the one of the purposes of the James Webb Telescope was to be able to look at the beginnings of the universe. And so we will hopefully see more of that and understand how the universe and the initial stars and galaxies were formed.
Thank you so much for that update. Our next story is from Afghanistan. A 4-year investigation by BBC has revealed evidence of war crimes by members of the UK's elite Special Air Service or SAS. These pertain to the repeated killings of unarmed men and detainees between 2010 and 2011. Military reports obtained during the course of the probe suggest that one unit may have killed 54 people in a single 6-month tour. We have with us Abdul for more. So Abdul, can you give us a quick summary of what have been the findings of the investigation?
Well, Panorama investigation basically talks about the deployment of the British forces, special British forces called SAS, Special Air Services. And it says that the units, subsequent units, several rounds of units which were deployed in Afghanistan were indulged in several kinds of war crimes. Starting with killing people who were in detention, indulging in cold blood murders, plotting evidences, and so on and so forth. It talks about how the Special Air, one of the units in Helmand, one of the provinces in Afghanistan, in 2010 and 11, within a year, killed more than dozens of people, 54 exactly, people in these kind of activities. Since the numbers were too high for a unit which was operating not exactly in the war situation, there were investigations initiated, but most of the investigations did not bring any result, primarily because the military stopped cooperating with whoever was involved in investigation. So Helmand is one case, but there are other regions in Afghanistan where this British military operations were found to be involved in different kinds of war crimes. It also talked about how the investigation, which was finally initiated in 2014, went on for 6 years, and finally when the new government came, Johnson's government, it basically stopped the investigation. It also talked about how the governments have tried to shield those who are involved in the different kinds of violations, cold blood killings of Afghans, basically tried to brush it up as serving the nation and so on and so forth. As we all know that the British troops the UK troops in Afghanistan were part of the larger NATO deployment in Afghanistan post 2001 war, and there had been different cases and allegations made from time to time of these forces being involved in war crime and human rights violations. One of the major, basically this investigation kind of substantiates the revelations made by WikiLeaks in 2011 also.
And Abdul, can you also tell us about what is the possibility of an official investigation being launched about this, and will those who are guilty, can they be held against the law?
Well, I'm very pessimistic about it, given the record of NATO and US and its allies, not only in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in other parts of the world as well. In fact, the US forces were involved in different kinds of war crimes. ICC started investigating it. The Trump administration denied the ICC investigators visa even to enter their country. So they completely they stop cooperating with whenever there is an international investigation happening. And within their own country, they do not initiate such investigation. In fact, in last year, in fact, basically when then one of the US forces attacked a civilian family, killed 10 people, claiming that they were terrorists planning to attack Kabul airport. Later on, they found out that this is not the case. Even then, the US armies and US government said that there will be no action taken against people involved. So I don't think there will be any investigation. Even if there is an investigation, for some reasons, there will be no action taken against anyone. This has been the record, as I said before. As I was referring to ICC investigation, which was initiated in 2020, there were pressure by the British government, by the US government, by other people involved in those activities to shut the investigation, and ICC had no other option but to shut it. So I think given the larger logic of occupation and imperialist war, punishing soldiers involved in such kind of war crimes will basically harm the interest of the imperialists, and therefore there will be no serious action ever initiated. If we think that something like that happened, then we are being naive. There is no other explanation for that.
Thank you so much for that update, Abdul. And finally, the UN Security Council has agreed to extend aid to rebel-held areas in Syria, especially in the Idlib province, for 6 more months. The decision was a compromise after an earlier decision to extend aid for a year was vetoed by Russia. Abdul is back with us for more. So, Abdul, can you tell us more about this aid, to whom it is being provided and by whom?
This is primarily aid provided by the UN agencies, different kinds of UN agencies, and humanitarian NGOs, NGOs working in the humanitarian field, through Turkey towards Syria, and particularly that part of Syria which is controlled by the so-called rebel forces, the forces which are backed by Turkey and other international actors since 2011 when the war began. Earlier, the aid was for most of the Syria, because if you remember, since 2011 till 2017, a large part of Syria was basically disputed claims captured by rebels here and there, and there were internally displaced people who were trying to move away from the government control area, people who were trying to move away from the rebel control area. Then there were ISIS atrocities, so people were fleeing. So people in Syria were basically displaced in large numbers. In fact, half of the population, pre-war population, was displaced. So the people who were displaced, people who were affected by the war, people who were affected by the ISIS atrocities, they needed aid because there was no system functioning in Syria because of the war. So UN initiated that process through the Security Council resolution, because there was no quote-unquote government, centralized government at the moment. And so for a very long time, from 2014 to 2020, the aids were provided from different border areas, from Iraq, from Turkey, and also from Jordan and other regions. There were 6+ border openings through which the aid was flowing in. Now, from 2017 onwards, those border areas were closed gradually, because the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad was able to re-control most of the regions, and they were able to create some kind of order within it. And so, now, particularly after 2020, the Idlib is the only province in Syria which is now controlled by the rebels, and the reason, because there is no government mechanism existing, the UN claims that there are around 4 million people in that small province. We should remember that the entire population of Syria is 20 million, and out of that, 90% of the population needs some kind of an aid to survive, because there are no economic opportunities available for them. Hence, we need to provide the aid. But the Syrian government has objections against it, and that is the background in which the resolution we were talking about.
And Abdul, so why did Russia veto this aid? What has largely been the history of Russia and Syria's position on this entire thing? Can you also tell us that?
Well, that is an interesting question. If we see the reports, particularly in the Western media, that particular aspect, the reasons behind Russia's veto have been blurred out, primarily because that does not suit their politics. The reason is that what Russia is saying is primarily the position which is taken by Syrian government. The situation was different in 2014-15 when the country, the entire country, it was not clear who is the authority. Now the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad claims that is authority, even recognizes that government there and Syrian government's authority over all its territory. Hence, the Syrian government is claiming that this is not good for the larger integration process which Syrian government is trying to work on. If you basically try to give aid to the Syrian people without consulting the Syrian government, one. The second objection is, if you want to give aid, of course there is no problem with that, but that you can always flow that aid, you can give that aid through the Syrian government official channels instead of giving it through Turkey, which is considered to be a hostile country which supports the rebels and so on and so forth. So Syrian government has claimed that the aid flowing from Turkey is also a way of providing illegal armaments and financial aid support to the rebel groups, and is basically prolongs the war in the country. So if you want to create peace, if you want to create integration in Syria, and the only way, the legitimate way will be to let the aid flow from the government side, and it should involve the Syrian government of Bashar al-Assad instead of involving Turkey, and which has a hostile record. So that was the objection, because of which Russia, because Syria is not part of the Security Council, so Russia, being a friendly country, basically was doing what you can say the bidding of the Syrian government, and that is the reason that Russia vetoed it. So Russia has agreed for 6 months extension now, after Ireland and Norway proposed an alternative resolution, with the proviso that there will be a next renewal after 6 months, and every 2 months there will be reporting about it. So the apprehensions of the Syrian government and apprehensions of the which basically comes from the record of the Turkey and other international actors vis-a-vis the war in Syria, is basically you can say examined. So that is the reason that Russia vetoed the resolution at the first place.
Thank you so much for that update, Abdul. And that's all we have for today. For more such stories and updates from around the globe, please keep watching our website peoplesdispatch.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram.